Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Today, I once more walk the vaults of the So Bad It's Good classic film. Now, when I did one of these last, if I remember rightly, the last one I covered was Deadly Spawn. See, can't even quite get the title right. And when I talked about that, I talked about the fact that it clearly was a film that had a very keen vision where it came to its practical monster effects, but didn't really know how to tell a story beyond that, other than showing off how grotesque and yet, pretty well made the sort of the practical monsters were. Food of the Gods almost feels like the next evolution of this. Well, so this was a 1976 horror film directed by Bert I. Gordon, who, as far as I can understand, it is, again, another special effects guy, really, who has found himself directing a horror film. And similarly, this is a film that is very keen on its visual effects and the way that it sort of creates the monsters in a very different way to Deadly Spawn, but at the same time that same level of passion and desire to sort of demonstrate how monster effects can be sort of created. The one advantage that I think Food of the Gods has, the next sort of level up, is that it is based on a H.G. Wells short story. And I think where, in terms of structure and character and plotting, if you're going to take an adaptation of a classic, well-beloved writer, someone who could construct a really intricate science fiction premise, and use that template to then create your special effects monster movie, it does take the burden off of a lot of the problems where it comes to plotting and characters and the sort of the things that apparently some people aren't that interested, though the rest of us are somewhat head scratching, thinking, well, isn't that the core of storytelling? So the basic premise of Food of the Gods is that different groups of people are all going to visit this island for their own reason, and each group or person is drawn to this farm where the farm seems to be producing a substance that, for inexplicable reasons, the farmer and farmer's wife decide to use in their grain and feed to their animals. So their sort of intention is to feed it to their chickens. And then, because it's grain and because of the nature of farmland, the rats get into it. And I want to say, was it mosquitoes? Or was it wasps? That's right. And the wasps, of course, are also getting into the substance or the grain. And so when our primary set of characters that appear to be this sort of trio of American footballers arrive at this farm, or arrive at this island, they are confronted by gigantic wasps and gigantic chickens and eventually gigantic rats. And then, so you have your three footballers, American footballers, sorry, for clarity's sake. You also have a man who was planning to make a financial deal with the farmer and his assistant, who appears to be a scientist. And then you also have a pregnant couple where, who for whatever reasons have decided to sort of have some... They sort of are supposed to be the sort of hippie type couple, sort of free-spirited, and they're just sort of camped out on the island to sort of as a getaway. And so these parties all sort of converge at different points in the plot on this farmland, and are then, menaced by sometimes the wasps, but primarily the rats. And of course that's a cool idea. And of course H.G. Wells would make a interesting story, because giant rats are quite a horror premise. You know, they're a good horror monster because, of course, there are lots of people who have a fear of rats, and of course, the way that rats gather together in groups and the sort of viciousness that rats can have means they make, you know, if they are made gigantic, could be a good threat. And even, like I say, B.I. Gordon really, you know, wants to show the effects work. And this is, bearing in mind, this is 1976, so it's not exactly like the effects are incredible, but for 1976 they're not bad. It's a lot of superimposing, you know, using a lot of, what's it called? Sort of using certain visual effects to make normal sized rats superimposed onto settings where they look gigantic, where you have things like filming rats playing around on toy cars or climbing on toy cars or you know, model buildings, that is then intercut with, you know, possibly a little bit of prosthetics with the characters then interacting with it, and it's done fairly well. It's not exactly unwatchable. The problem, again, comes back round to the fact that this is a director who doesn't really know how to direct. Because the plot is confused, the characters feel very underdeveloped, and their response to their environment is bemused at best. You know, the whole point of horror is, of course, the sort of the empathy factor, where we are horrified because we empathise with characters who are experiencing something horrific. The problem with this film is, with the exception of the attack scenes, and some of them are done quite well, the characters who aren't in immediate peril have a very lackadaisical attitude to the threat. So there are moments where characters sort of, you know, are confronted by a giant chicken, and then they go into another route, escape, go into the farmhouse, and then, you know, having a go about this giant chicken, but more as a inconvenience rather than sort of this unbelievable event. And then I think that's where the problem lies, is it treats the extraordinary as ordinary, as if the threat is sort of normal. And then it sort of has strange things, like it clearly wants to do the Stephen King style of storytelling, where you have, you know, your core characters, and each one has a certain personality type, and you know, you have your sort of corrupt businessman, you have your evangelical Christian lady who thinks sin has been brought upon them, you have your sort of, like I say, the hippie couple. You sort of have this sort of ensemble, and yet the problem is that there are moments when you get the sense of personality from them, and there are moments where they are just they're just a group, and there's nothing particularly interesting or extraordinary about them. And with the exception possibly of the scientist, her skills come into play a little bit. They fall into very basic character archetypes, particularly with the evangelical Christian lady, the farmer's wife, who is so, like, cliched. And again, there is a point in which, so there are the maggots that will eventually turn into wasps, and she is at one point confronted by them and attacked and loses some of her arm to it. And yet, as I say, this film does not treat anything with any sense of threat or horror to it. She treats it as if she's been burnt rather than losing her whole arm. And it's that kind of thing that's just really strange and really shows sort of someone who doesn't really know how to sort of create a sense of people and emergency. So yeah, it's a curious film, because it's not even, it's in the category of so good it's bad, because yes, it is badly plotted, poorly directed, etc, etc, but it's not, it's barely funny bad. It actually is just a rather mediocre science fiction horror with some cool effects, but then counterbalanced with some very bad performances and directing. So I feel very mixed about it because I don't actually regret watching it. It is interesting to see that kind of work being done in the 70s. It's just a shame that it's overall a bit of a damp squib. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video because this all helps in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of almost 250 videos. I am incredibly close. And follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about films and TV shows, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.